March 7, 2025. South Carolina carries out its first execution by firing squad in over a decade. The condemned, Brad Keith Sigmon, convicted of the brutal 2001 double homicide of David and Gladys Lark. In the quiet town of Taylors, South Carolina, a family's worst nightmare became a reality. A brutal attack inside a modest home left 2 people dead and a community reeling. The man responsible? A former family acquaintance, Brad Keith Sigmon. This was no random act of violence. It was personal. It was deliberate. And it was merciless. More than 2 decades later, the state carried out a controversial sentence. Sigman met his fate, standing before a row of armed marksmen, a target placed over his heart. The execution, a method almost unheard of in modern times, reignited national debates. A punishment long thought to belong to the past, brought back in a high-profile case. Was this justice? Or was this vengeance? Today, we will take you through the full story. The crime, the pursuit, the trial, the final days of a man sentenced to die. We will unravel the details that gripped the nation and expose the moments that led to one of the most controversial executions in modern American history. Welcome to True Crime Chronicle, where we serve you with true crime stories that keep you at the edge of your seat and wonder the kinds of evil that lurks within the heart of men. Please hit the subscribe button and let's ride into mystery together. David and Gladys Lark were the embodiment of quiet Southern living. He was a retiree, known for his unwavering kindness. She was a devoted wife and mother, deeply loved by her family. Their home was a place of warmth, a place of trust. Until one night, that trust was shattered. But their lives would be irrevocably changed by one man, Brad Keith Sigmon. A man who, for years, had been entangled in a relationship with their daughter, Rebecca Barber. What began as love turned to obsession. And that obsession led to devastation. Brad Keith Sigmon wasn't a stranger to the Larks. He had been part of their lives, a familiar face known to the family. But beneath that familiarity was a growing resentment. A bitterness that would drive him to violence stemming from one decision made by Barber. April 27, 2001. The day everything changed. Rebecca Barber had made a decision to end her relationship with Sigmon. She had seen the signs and felt the growing unease. But Sigmon refused to let go. And when words and pleas failed him, he resorted to something final. That night, Sigmon forced his way into the Lark home. What unfolded in the minutes that followed was an attack so brutal, it left investigators shaken. What the officers found inside was a scene of unrelenting violence. A home that had once been a place of peace was now a crime scene soaked in horror. The attack was not quick. It was not merciful. It unleashed rage. David Lark was the first to be struck. A single blow to the head sent him crashing to the ground. Before he could react, another strike fell. Then another. The force was devastating. Gladys Lark, hearing the commotion, rushed toward the chaos. She never had a chance. The weapon? A baseball bat. The assault? Unrelenting. By the time it was over, the damage was irreparable. The bodies of David and Gladys Lark lay in their home, their lives stolen in a moment of fury. Rebecca Barber had been the intended target. But by some twist of fate, she was not there when Sigmon arrived. It was her parents who paid the price. When she arrived, Sigmon forced her into a 2001 Honda Passport at gunpoint. Sigmon's plan was to switch vehicles and drive his car up to North Carolina with Barber. However, Barber managed to jump out of the Honda and run away. Sigmon shot at her while giving chase, but Barber managed to escape. Sigmon relented and fled the scene. Barber subsequently underwent treatment in the Greenville Memorial Hospital. After the murders became known, the police conducted a nationwide manhunt for Sigmon. A charge sheet was issued for Sigmon on charges of murder, pertaining to the Larks, and kidnapping and assault with intent to kill, pertaining to Barber's abduction. After 11 days, Sigman was captured in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Then, he was extradited back to South Carolina. The state authorities also planned to seek the death penalty for Sigman with respect to the double murder charges. Following his arrest, Brad Sigman was indicted by a South Carolina grand jury on charges including 2 counts of murder, first-degree burglary, and kidnapping. At his July 2002 trial for the murders and burglary, Sigman reportedly confessed his guilt to the jury, which convicted him on all charges and proceeded to determine his sentence. Prosecutors pursued the death penalty, arguing that Sigman's brutal killing of victims Gladys and David Lark warranted execution to reflect the same mercy he demonstrated during the crimes. They emphasized aggravating factors, such as the heinous nature of the murders. In contrast, Sigman's defense team urged life imprisonment, citing mitigating circumstances like his history of substance abuse, behavioral struggles, and reported good conduct while incarcerated. Despite these appeals, the jury unanimously sentenced Sigman to death for both murders on July 20, 2002, alongside a 30-year prison term for burglary. Sigman's subsequent legal challenges were systematically rejected. The South Carolina Supreme Court upheld his convictions and death sentences on direct appeal in 2005 and again in 2013. Federal courts later dismissed his petitions. The U.S. District Court for South Carolina denied his first federal appeal in 2018, followed by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in 2020. The U.S. Supreme Court ultimately declined to review his case in 2021, exhausting his final avenue for appeal. 4 years, Sigman sat on death row. Appeals were filed. His attorneys argued against the method of execution. But in the end, South Carolina upheld the decision. Before we proceed, I would like to explain the 3 main widely known methods of execution in the United States of America. The first is known as lethal injection, the most common method, involving intravenous administration of 3 drugs: a sedative to induce unconsciousness, a paralytic to halt breathing, and potassium chloride to stop the heart. The second is known as electric chair execution. The condemned is strapped to a reinforced chair, and electrodes deliver multiple high-voltage currents to cause fatal brain and organ damage. The last, firing squad, rarely used in modern history. This method involves a team of shooters aiming at the inmate's heart from behind a barrier. No state has carried out an execution by firing squad in approximately 15 years. Now, back to our story. Brad Keith was initially scheduled for execution on February 12, 2021, but the South Carolina Supreme Court issued an indefinite stay 1 week prior, citing the state's lack of lethal injection drugs, its only legally authorized execution method at the time. South Carolina had effectively halted executions since 2011 due to a lethal injection drug shortage, stemming from expired stockpiles and pharmaceutical companies' refusal to supply drugs for capital punishment. In response, state legislators passed a 2021 law reinstating the electric chair and authorizing firing squads as alternative methods when lethal injection is unavailable. While the state resolved its drug shortage by September 2023, Sigman's case unfolded earlier. After the law's passage, officials set new execution dates for Sigman, June 18, 2021, by electric chair, and fellow inmate Freddie Owens, June 25, 2021. However, the South Carolina Supreme Court suspended both warrants, ruling that inmates must be allowed to choose between electrocution and firing squad, despite the latter method's protocols remaining incomplete. The court also noted pending litigation from Sigman and Owens challenging the constitutionality of the electric chair's revival. Sigman's execution was rescheduled a third time to May 13, 2022, but he received another stay pending resolution of ongoing lawsuits contesting South Carolina's execution methods. In 2023, Brad Sigman joined a coalition of South Carolina death row inmates in filing a landmark lawsuit challenging the state's newly enacted execution methods, the electric chair and firing squad, as unconstitutional. The plaintiffs argued that both methods risked inflicting extreme pain and suffering, violating the Eighth Amendment's prohibition of cruel and unusual punishment. They contended that the electric chair could cause prolonged agony through burns or incomplete electrocution, while the firing squad, though rare, might result in botched shots or psychological torment for inmates forced to participate in their own deaths by selecting the method. South Carolina officials defended the protocols, asserting that both methods complied with legal standards for capital punishment. The state's attorneys argued that the U.S. Constitution does not guarantee a painless execution, citing historical precedents where courts upheld electrocution and firing squads as lawful. They emphasized that the methods were adopted out of necessity amid lethal injection shortages and followed rigorous procedural safeguards to minimize suffering. On July 31, 2024, the South Carolina Supreme Court issued a decisive 5-0 ruling dismissing the inmates' claims and affirming the constitutionality of both execution methods. While the court unanimously rejected the cruelty argument, individual judges diverged in their reasoning. 3 justices endorsed the firing squad as swift and mechanical, while 4 endorsed the electric chair as a historically established practice. The ruling lifted the final legal barrier to resuming executions, directly impacting all 32 individuals on the state's death row, including Sigman. At the time of the decision, 5 inmates, Sigman, Freddie Eugene Owens, Michael Mardy, Richard Bernard Moore, and Marion Bowman Jr., had exhausted all appeals and faced imminent execution dates. Their cases marked the culmination of South Carolina's 13-year hiatus in executions, which began in 2011 due to lethal injection drug shortages and legal battles over method legality. The moratorium officially ended on September 20, 2024, with the execution of Freddie Owens, who was put to death by electric chair for the 1997 murder of convenience store clerk Irene Graves during a robbery. Owens's execution reignited public debate, drawing protests from anti-death penalty advocates and renewed media scrutiny of the state's revised protocols. Richard Moore followed on November 1, 2024, becoming the second inmate executed under the new framework, while Marion Bowman Jr., convicted of a 1998 double homicide, was executed on January 31, 2025. Each case underscored the state's renewed commitment to carrying out capital punishment after years of dormancy, though questions about method ethics and transparency persisted. On August 28, 2024, the South Carolina Supreme Court issued an order allowing the state to carry out 6 executions over the next year, with each execution scheduled to occur 35 days, or 5 weeks, apart. Sigman was one of those 6 executions in the order. The other 5 individuals on the list were Freddie Eugene Owens, Richard Bernard Moore, Marion Bowman Jr., Stephen Bixby, and Michael Mardy. Owens and Moore, who were sentenced to death in 1999 and 2001 respectively, became the first 2 to be executed, on September 20 and November 1, 2024. On February 7, 2025, the South Carolina Supreme Court set Brad Sigmon's execution for March 7, 2025, granting him until February 21 to select his method: lethal injection, electrocution, or firing squad. Defaulting to the electric chair should he refuse to choose, the court's order marked the culmination of Sigman's decades-long legal saga. A week later, Sigman sought a stay of execution, urging the court to delay proceedings until his legal team could review the autopsy report of Marion Bowman Jr., executed 2 weeks prior. His lawyers argued that Sigman, reluctant to face the electric chair and wary of lethal injection due to accounts of prolonged deaths in recent executions, needed clarity on the risks. Witnesses had described inmates taking over 20 minutes to die after receiving pentobarbital, a single-drug protocol South Carolina adopted amid shortages of traditional lethal injection chemicals. 54. By the February 21 deadline, Sigman simultaneously pursued 2 paths. He petitioned the court to reconsider his eligibility for execution, citing lifelong brain damage, mental illness, and childhood trauma as disqualifying factors under constitutional protections against executing the intellectually disabled or psychologically impaired. That same day, he selected the firing squad, a method last used in the U.S. in 2010, Utah, and never before employed in South Carolina. At 67, Sigman would become the state's oldest executed individual since capital punishment's reinstatement. Sigman's attorney revealed his client's harrowing rationale: Fearing the electric chair might burn him alive, and distrusting lethal injection after reports of inmates gasping for breath, he opted for the firing squad despite its brutality. "He knows it will shatter his bones and destroy his organs," the attorney stated, but he viewed it as the least torturous option. Sigman agonized over imposing trauma on witnesses and family but deemed the firing squad's swiftness preferable to draw out suffering. South Carolina's Department of Corrections confirmed readiness, having retrofitted a death chamber in 2022 at a cost of $54,000 to accommodate firing squads. The protocol mandates hooding and restraining the inmate in a chair before a 3-member team, positioned 15 feet away, fires rifles equipped with live rounds. Witnesses observe through bullet-resistant glass, limited to a right-profile view of the condemned. On February 27, Sigman renewed his plea for a stay after Bowman's autopsy revealed pulmonary edema, fluid in the lungs linked to the 2-dose pentobarbital protocol, suggesting death by sensation of drowning. His lawyers argued Sigman faced an unconstitutional dilemma: choose a violent firing squad or risk a torturous lethal injection. The state Supreme Court denied the stay on March 4, asserting procedural compliance. Sigman's final appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court was rejected hours before his execution on March 7, 2025. Concurrently, clemency pleas to Governor Henry McMaster highlighted Sigman's rehabilitation, his religious devotion, camaraderie with inmates, and remorse. Supporters contended he was no longer the man who committed the 2001 double murder. McMaster, unmoved, declined intervention. Sigman's case underscored the ethical quagmire of execution methods in an era of drug scarcity and legal scrutiny. His choice of the firing squad, a relic seldom used since 1976, reignited debates over humane execution in the face of systematic uncertainties. As South Carolina resumed executions after a 13-year hiatus, Sigman's story became a grim footnote in the national discourse on capital punishment's moral and practical complexities. As Brad Sigman's execution approached, Rebecca Armstrong, née Barbara, Sigman's former partner and the daughter of his victims, voiced a conflicted stance on his fate. While opposing the death penalty on principle, Armstrong acknowledged her desire for accountability, stating, "My parents were simple, kind-hearted people who dedicated their lives to their 5 children and helping others. They held our family together." Her son, the Lark's grandson, planned to witness the execution, determined to see Sigman pay the ultimate price for murdering his grandparents. Meanwhile, firearms experts raised alarms about the safety protocols for South Carolina's newly operational firing squad chamber. They warned that bullet-resistant walls might not fully prevent ricochets or fragmentation, posing risks to executioners and witnesses. When pressed for details on mitigating these hazards, state officials declined to comment, leaving critical questions unanswered just days before the execution. On March 7, 2025, Brad Sigman, 67, was executed by firing squad at South Carolina's Broad River Correctional Institution. At 6:05 p.m., a volunteer team of prison employees fired .308 Winchester rounds, ammunition designed to fragment upon impact, destroying vital organs, into Sigman's chest as he sat hooded and restrained in a metal chair. Witnesses reported his body tensing, his arms flexing violently, and his midsection heaving for several seconds before he fell motionless. He was pronounced dead at 6:08 p.m., with a basin positioned beneath the chair to collect blood pooling from his wounds. Sigman became the 4th person executed by firing squad in the U.S. since 1976 and the first outside Utah, marking South Carolina's historic adoption of the method. Approved attendees, including victim family members, attorneys, religious counselors, and journalists, observed the execution through bullet-resistant glass. Associated Press reporter Jeffrey Collins noted there was no warning or countdown before the shots rang out. Sigman, hooded with a target over his heart and his jaw secured by a sling, appeared to mouth "I'm okay" to his lawyer moments before the firing squad acted. Collins described a jagged red spot the size of a small fist on Sigman's chest and observed his torso moving silently 2 or 3 times post-impact. WYFF4 News Anna Dobbins recounted a splash of blood upon impact, along with involuntary muscle movements in Sigman's arms and midsection. She emphasized he showed no visible fear beforehand, stating, "There was something in his midsection that moved. I'm not necessarily going to call them breaths. I don't really know." Sigman's attorney, Gerald Bo King, condemned the execution as horrifying and violent, detailing how Sigman's arm quivered as if trying to break free and the wound opened abruptly and violently. King later read Sigman's final statement, which called for an end to capital punishment. "I want my closing statement to be one of love and a calling to my fellow Christians to end the death penalty. An eye for an eye was used to justify seeking my execution. But we no longer live under Old Testament law, we live under God's grace and mercy. No one has the authority to take lives except Him." The execution reignited debates over method ethics, particularly after firearms experts raised concerns about ricochets in the retrofitted chamber, though officials dismissed these risks. Sigman's choice of firing squad, driven by fears of electrocution burning him alive, and lethal injections' alleged prolongation of suffering, highlighted the moral dilemmas inmates face amid scarce execution drugs. His final meal request included fried chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes, biscuits, cheesecake, and sweet tea. Reports conflicted over whether his wish to share 3 buckets of chicken with fellow inmates was honored. Sigman's death concluded a 24-year legal battle for the murders of David and Gladys Lark in 2001. Their daughter, Rebecca Armstrong, opposed the death penalty but sought accountability, calling her parents simple, kind-hearted people who held our family together. Her son, the Lark's grandson, attended the execution, later stating Sigman had paid the ultimate price. 72. As South Carolina resumed executions after a 13-year hiatus, Sigman's case underscored the visceral realities of capital punishment and the enduring divide over its place in a society grappling with justice, mercy, and the boundaries of retribution. What do you think? Was justice truly served? Was the death sentence a necessary punishment, or has the system failed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into true crime cases, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you in our next gripping true crime story. But until then, stay away from crime.